Foreign Minister Winston Peters has launched a scathing attack on the permanent superpower members of the United Nations Security Council, accusing them of abusing their veto power and calling for reform. He also despaired at the lack of action over the catastrophic war in Gaza as Israel shunned a 21-day ceasefire in Lebanon. Here's senior political correspondent Jenna Lynch.
The children of war hardly flinching at the sound of airstrikes. In Lebanon, the sound of explosion is constant, so too the sound of the aftermath. Genuine and legitimate hopes for a ceasefire, a 21-day halt in the fighting, was being sold by the Americans as nearly a sure bet.
You're able to generate significant support from Europe as well as the Arab nations who forced this war not widen. I'll have more to say about it tomorrow.
But the strikes on the south continued, and as Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu arrived in New York for the UN General Assembly, he declared the fight would go on, and it would go on with full force. Another 60 Lebanese people were reported killed. A Hezbollah MP says their terms are clear.
As long as there is no ceasefire in Gaza, all the resistance fronts will not stop confronting Israel.
Foreign Minister Winston Peters voicing New Zealand's dismay at what he called the catastrophic and ruinous path that has been followed in Gaza.
We are most concerned about the generational consequences of this level of suffering and violence, with no end in sight, and which sees us on the precipice of an even wider conflict.
Lambasting the Security Council for inaction.
Where is the sincerity and moral determination of today's leaders at the vortex of this unacceptable violence?
Particularly taking aim at the permanent members, Russia, the US, France, China and the United Kingdom, who hold veto power.
Power waxes and wanes, so yesterday's great powers, today's permanent members of the Security Council, are challenged by periods of competition or worse, abuse of the veto.
Name-checking Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine and its veto of a resolution condemning its actions.
We need a United Nations Security Council that looks more like today's world. And we need veto reform.
New Zealand tried to achieve that when it last chaired the UN Security Council, the superpowers too powerful.
So to that end, we announced today New Zealand's intention as a voice for smaller states to campaign for a seat on the Security Council for the 2039-40 term.
Throwing our hat in the ring, 15 years out.
Okay, Jenna, did you say 15 years?
Yeah, I did a bit of a double take on that as well, Laura, so I hit the phones to find out what was going on. First of all, a bit of context. There are 15 members of the United Nations Security Council. 5 of those are the permanent members, Russia, China, France, the US and the UK, that have that veto power Winston Peters was talking about there. The remaining 10 spots are voted in for 2-year terms, and they are hotly contested. So last time we got a spot on the council in 2015-16, it took a 10-year long campaign, and despite the government promising it wouldn't use its chequebook during that campaign, we ended up flying people, voting members out to Queenstown for a jolly just ahead of the vote to secure that seat on the council. Now this time around, the diplomats and the officials have looked to the future to find a date in which no one has stamped their country's name on yet, hoping that we can do it kind of without this campaign, lob so far into the future that we might just sneak through. And in case anyone is wondering, I have done the math. If this were to be successful, Winston Peters would be 93 years of age when we take that seat. No word from him on whether or not he is going to stand at the 2038 New Zealand general election.